My belief for a very long time is that I didn't believe I was beautiful at all. Thank you for being here. So we've been on. I started by calling it finding the authentic you. But then you realize I changed the name to Discovering the Authentic You because I thought to myself that finding is not really the right word because the authentic you exists. The authentic you has been there for ages. It's only that sometimes we don't get to that authentic us. We live a counterfeit, we live a copy, we tend to neglect the authentic us. And so that's why you will realize I changed the name from Finding the Authentic You to Discovering because it's like we are getting into our inner world and asking ourselves, who exactly am I? Who am I? And day one, I began by saying a basic human being asks themselves four questions. There are many questions, but I just narrowed down on the four that we ask ourselves: who am I? Who exactly am I? I'm sure all of us have reached a point where you really ask yourself, who am I? And then why exactly am I on earth? What's my purpose on earth? Why did I come here? Personally, there's a time I felt so purposeless that I began seeking for an answer to that. Yet the answer always laid inside me. And then what do I stand for? As a person, what do I stand for? And where am I going? And so these are the questions we are aiming to answer through the 30-day life tour that we are doing. I didn't call it a challenge, but I know it is because I'm playing with our minds so that our minds don't think I'm waking up to a challenge. But when you think I'm waking up to a journey, then you're excited about it. But when you think I'm waking up to a challenge, sometimes our brains will want to resist. We resist new things. So that's what we started by doing in day one, introducing what exactly we are covering here. And then on day two, we went to uncovering or understanding our core beliefs, where I said, I like to call it coding. That's how I call it in my program. And this is how we are wired, right from our childhood. How exactly are we wired? What exactly forms who we are, what we believe, and why? And that is a very deep journey because for me, this is one part that led to a lot of crying. And that's why I say one of the reasons I thought, no, we can't just go on as if there's nothing happening because I don't know how this falls on each and every one of us. And so we were looking at our core beliefs and then reframing them. And that is a very powerful exercise because think about it. If for a long time, like for me, my belief for a very long time is that I didn't believe I was beautiful at all. And when I was doing my transformational journey, I had to try and uncover where did that come from. And I remember that as a child, I had a big body. I was what we would say kapumpum. And people would always point that out that Abini Kanono, Abini Kanono, Abini Kanono. And so I grew up thinking Abini Kanono. And so it grew up in me. I grew up with that, thinking I am not beautiful. And so all the time, I wanted my definition of beauty to come from someone else, either my husband, my friends, that when I would dress in a certain way, and then somebody just makes the mistake of saying, hey, na hii nguo yako, that would be the end of me that day. So when I uncovered that and realized, oh, it actually came from my childhood. And I don't know if I've shared this story with some of you. One of the things also that I still have, I'm a big footed person. And so one day, my uncle and my mother, they are talking and they think they are joking, but they're actually affecting me. So what did they say? They started saying that, your leg is so big, you'll never even have a shoe. We kiatu tutakuwa tukienda kutengeneza custom made in butter. You're not going. And the following day, as I was walking to and back from school, I was asking God, God, why did you hate me so much and give me a very bad foot? But my mother and my uncle didn't know that they were affecting me. And so I had to change that into a positive belief about myself. And so that is part of what we are doing, reframing. Because when we reframe, and that's why I give an affirmation every day, that's how we begin to now give a new narrative to our brains and tell our brains a different story so that we're able to change the story that we have held so dearly in our minds. And then we went into unpacking our past. And I know that can be another deep one for some people because some pasts are not so easy. Some parts are not so easy to deal with. But then we have to get to points where we befriend our past and learn from them, grow from them, and discover what we need to heal from them. Because if we don't heal, then as women, we will tend to infect others with the pains that we carry in our hearts. And so we did a lot of reframing there, where you take your past experience. Uh, in my program, I lead people to write them down. We call them defining moments, things that have happened in your life. We go deep into them and we ask ourselves, how exactly would you have wanted this to be? For example, for me, my reframing is my uncle and my mother said this about my leg, and this made me feel blah, blah, blah. But then how I reframe it is how I wished they would have told me. And so I reframe it to my uncle and my mother said beautiful things about my leg. And from then, I began believing that my legs are very, very beautiful. So that's the whole way of rephrasing our beliefs, changing them into something positive. So the more you will read the new beliefs that you have reframed, the more they begin. Because the reason you believed the beliefs that you had, or the from your past experiences, is because they were repeatedly told to you, or you repeatedly told them to yourself. So it works the same way to change it to positive, that the same way you repeated it to yourself negatively, now you go ahead and repeat it to yourself positively. And so that is what we have been doing. And then we went deeper into self awareness, where we evaluated our strengths and our weaknesses. And here we had the column where you write your strengths. If you've gone for a job interview and you're asked what are your weaknesses, we struggle with that because we are not keen on evaluating something in us that may not be very, very positive. And even when we are told, I remember one exercise we did somewhere that I worked, and one day we were told to you just anonymously write on a sticker positive things about somebody and negative things. And I remember when I read the negative things that were said, I felt so bad. It was a pain. I didn't sleep well that night, but I kept thinking about it because to me, I was Miss Perfect. people should see perfection in me. Why did they see wrong things about me? But later thinking about them, they were actually telling me the truth. So I had to consider what will I do for me to change from these negatives to positives. And then we looked at core values, where uh, somebody actually said it was a tall order on her thinking about these core values. But core values are just things that you hold dearly to. Sometimes the reason we may not take them seriously is because we may have never thought about them, but they are there. There are these things that we keep saying, uh, I can't do that. I never do that. That's not me. When you find yourself saying, that's not me, then what is you is actually your core value. So when I discovered my core values, I understood so much about the decisions I have been making in life. For example, I understood one of my core values is family. For me, my family comes first. And so I realized that when I am asked anything, the first thing I think of is how will it affect my family? I realized that faith for me is a core value. And so when I have to do something, I'm asking, how is it in alignment with my faith? I realized that integrity is a core value for me. So when somebody lies to me, it really affects me. And when people are thinking of doing things in a crafty way, they will go on and sleep, but I will have a sleepless night about it. So when you realize such things, then you begin to know that if I make decisions based on my core values, then I will be happy. And one of the reasons we are unhappy is whatever we are going through in life, it's actually punching hard on our core values. Maybe you have a spouse who is continually punching hard on your core values, a parent, a mother in law, whoever, and that really affects you. So that discovery is very powerful, and sometimes it's also powerful to discover the core values of another person. For example, if you discover that the core value of your spouse is respect, for example, then you go ahead and you want to meet that core value. And when you do, um, things seem to fall in place. If you realize that their core value is honesty, then you become more honest with them. Accountability, then you begin to think of how will I be accountable to my spouse. And then today we looked at self love. I thought of us having an easy weekend. So self love, I'm sure, is something we would all love to do, to love ourselves. But sometimes we don't really invest in it, not in matters money, but in matters time. Just having time for ourselves to think about ourselves, to do things for ourselves, just meditating, taking that slow bath and just being happy that you're actually there for yourself. And so those are the things, the overview of what we have looked at. So I just want to invite us, if you feel that you have something you want to say, you can lift your hand, I will see, and you can say. We are not many, so we can have a discussion around this. You can also drop in the chat and see whether we can make this interactive. And so the purpose for that week one was actually to discover who we are, who exactly are we. It's my hope that each and every one of us who managed to do the exercises did them consistently, because as you know, consistency is the language your brain will understand. If you do something today, skip tomorrow, then chances of transformation become slim, or you have a slower journey than a person who will do what they are doing consistently. So it's my hope that we have all been consistent in doing what we are able to do, because I keep hearing people say I didn't do it because I was very busy, and I keep wondering, well, do you have time for yourself? Because I have found it very important to create at least 30 minutes just for me, just thinking about who am I, what do I want today, what how do I want to face this day, and that has been very very transformative for me. So when I hear people saying catching up with day three when you're in day six, of course I keep quiet, but then at the back of my mind I'm wondering, why are you too busy for yourself? You shouldn't be too busy for yourself because you're the number one resource that you should actually invest in. And so we have invested in our individual growth, discovering so much about ourselves. It's my hope that the exercises we've done have been impactful and that we feel a difference in us. And I would also want to know, were there any difficulties that we faced that we need to address? Are there things we feel like we should have done a bit differently so that we change them for the coming days? Because we are just at day six, we have 24 days to go. And then our commitment to the self discipline, to discipline is actually committing yourself to be there, whether you feel like or not, whether the situation is actually conducive or not. You commit yourself to be there. That is what discipline is all about. And then ask ourselves, what action are we going to commit ourselves to so that we make the coming days more profitable to us, and that we actually enjoy this journey? Because to me, it's a very important journey that we start with as we start the year. Because if you are in alignment with the authentic you, then so much will fall into place. But sometimes we are not in alignment. Next week, we are going to make this very, very practical. It's going to go into who we are in our spaces of work, our marriages, our parenting, and all that. We're going to make this more practical. So as we go on, because what we've been doing is digging in so that once we are done with the beliefs and all that, we can now make it more practical. So either towards the end of the week or the coming week, we're going to make it more practical and to how it really affects us in our daily lives. How are we showing up as our authentic selves? Are we talking like our authentic selves? Are we, eating like our authentic selves? There is a question I like to ask myself when I'm eating something. I ask myself, would the authentic you eat that? Would the authentic you talk like that? And that has been shaping how I do things. Would the authentic you be afraid to talk, for example? Would the authentic you just keep quiet and watch things happen? And so when you ask yourself those questions, you begin to have the courage to show up. Because the reason most people don't have that courage to show up is they they're afraid of actually showing up. They're afraid of being seen. And we want to overcome that as women and decide that it's okay for us to be seen. And when we begin with the small places, the small spaces we are in, then we are able to show up in the bigger spaces when the opportunities avail themselves to us. So that's just an overview of what we have done. Is there anyone who would want to share with us how their journey has been this week, where you enjoyed, where it's been difficult, what you would want us to improve, anything you want to share? Could there be anyone who would want to share that with us, or any question you want to ask? Please Okay, Janet, your hand is up, kindly.
You've talked about knowing core values,
Yeah,
your own core values, and for the spouse. And if they are conflicting, what will you do?
that's a good question because core values are actually, for example, you may have the core value which you want to be at home and you love that, and your core value, your spouse's core value is freedom, for example. Like one of my fellow coaches, his core value is freedom. And so every time he used to be employed in a company, he would just create issues and then he would be fired. And then he started wondering what's going on. And one day in doing the program, he realized, it's because my value is freedom, and so being held in an office is not my thing. And so when we know our spouse's core values, we then, of course, that calls for other disciplines in marriage, like conversation. We talk about it and want to realize what are our core values and how do they affect us, and how then can we go about this? Because the biggest undoing we do in our marriages is be quiet. But if we talked and asked each other, what are your, for example, if freedom is the core value of your spouse, and then for him, he wants to go out and you want to stay in the house, that can really bring a crash. But then there's somebody I was talking to this week, and I was telling her about something they call the let them theory, that sometimes you've got to let people be. You just let them. Are people ignoring you? Let them. Are people doing this? Let them. Because remember, even though we are spouses living in the same house, we are walking, we could be walking different journeys of life in terms of our purposes and all that. So the best thing we can do is decide to work together, even as we align and help each other. And so talking about it is what would be important. Because I remember when I discovered my core values, because I didn't know about core values in the first place. And then I started looking at my husband because he hadn't gone through the transformational journey. And so I looked at him and realized some of his core values. And I discovered that these are actually his core values. I started just working around them. We started talking about them. And I think that improved how we communicate and how we live together. It really brought a lot of improvement. So, in a nutshell, communication, we know, is the key to any successful marriage. Marriage can never be built on autopilot. So, the biggest favor couples will do for themselves is decide that we are going to talk about this, that we are going to invest in talking about our marriages, be it in our own space or involve somebody who will help us in this. When I have done my program with couples and they discover their core values, it's very interesting because you will see the exchange in their eyes that, oh, no wonder this is what you do. No wonder this is what you do. And it's always very interesting. I hope that answers you. Do we have any other? Aggie?
Okay, thank you, Abby.
Mhm,
When you were giving us the exercise to do.
mhm,
Realized I had a challenge
mhm,
because sometimes you get involved in something
mhm.
that affects you as a person, and or it affects maybe your faith, and
Yeah.
you feel you have forgotten it. You feel you have moved on with life,
Mhm,
and that is a past story. But as you were doing the exercise, it
mhm,
triggered that this is coming fresh to my mind again. So,
mhm.
and you feel like I don't want to do this exercise again. So how do you handle such a case? Let me just mention the second question. And the second question, so that you tackle all of them. The
Okay.
second question, when you're talking about the core values, you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned about day 5, you mentioned something about baseline activity. You talked about it being a game changer. Kindly share a little light on the same so that we understand. What did you
Okay.
mean by baseline activity?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let me first answer the first one, where you find it difficult for you to do it. And now remember, this is a brain game. Transformation is always a mind game. And our minds are never comfortable with change. The way we are wired as human beings, we are not even wired to be comfortable, by the way. Our minds are not looking for comfort, they are looking for safety. And so if your brain interprets that this is going to to make me unsafe, it will run away from it. Now, you may not understand when I say we are not wired to be comfortable. If I come from a family that knew chaos, I'm going to resist a man who is peaceful because I'm not used to that. My brain does not interpret that as safe. And so when my husband will come home and quarrel, it takes me to my safe place. So sometimes our brain takes safety in wrong things. So it takes me to my safe place. And I find that familiar. Our brains love the familiar. And so we want to dwell there. We want to stay within the familiar circles. And that's why if you take somebody outside the environment they are used to and place them in another environment, they tend to resist. If it's a good environment, they tend to create chaos. You may take, for example, you take somebody from Ushago and bring them to your home, and they are used to a certain way of doing things. They create a lot of problems in your house because they are trying to create the familiar that they are used to. And they are wondering, why exactly should I do what you're telling me to do? That's not familiar. And so what we are doing may not be familiar to your brain. And so your brain will resist it. You will feel like it's not comfortable. I don't want to do this. And so that calls for a lot of intentionality, because what happens is that if you say that you had forgotten about it, then you didn't forget about it. What you did is you buried it. You buried it, and so it was just waiting for a trigger. And so this became a trigger for you. So the best thing is to actually go into it. Sometimes we are afraid of confronting our feelings, but it's the best thing to do. Sitting down with your feelings and asking yourself, what exactly am I feeling? I learned to ask myself that question during my journey, where my coach would tell me, Abby, how are you feeling? And then I would say a million things. And then she would ask me again, how exactly are you feeling? And then I would pause. And then I would say, I'm angry. And then she would ask, why are you angry? And then I would say, because he did. And then he'd say, no, Abby, why are you angry? And then I would come back to me. Why exactly am I angry? What did this trigger in me? What did this affect in me? It's not about the other person, it's about me. What is it triggering in me? And so this is what this is all about. When, for example, let me use the example of a spouse. When your spouse does something and you're mad at him, you're not necessarily mad at your spouse. It is just triggering something in you, because another person will take it as normal and they just be okay. So that's why we address the root. So the best medicine for in that is to decide that I will not keep running away from this. I will sit down and ask myself, Abby, what did you do? I did one, two, three. How did that affect your core value? For example, faith. When I did this, I betrayed my faith in one, two, three. That in that way you're taking responsibility. You're not blaming anyone else. You're taking responsibility. And then, what can I learn from this? And then, now that it has already happened, what do I do about it? So when you process it, that's a whole process. You process it, and at the end of the day, you'll find it processed and it comes to an end. But if we don't process, one day it shows up and begins to haunt us. Thank you so much for watching. We are on a 30-day live tour, discovering the authentic you. This was week 1 evaluation. Join us on my Facebook page. See the link in the description box. Feel free to contact us via the contacts given in the description box. Please subscribe, like, and share. See you again as we catch up on week 2 coming weekend. God bless you.